Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, and today I'll be sharing the books that I read for the month of March. I know it's a little early, but considering there's only 2 more days in the month of March, I am not going to be finishing another book because I know I have a bunch of stuff to do for school and work, so that's not happening. But just a summary, to give a brief summary, I did end up reading the Bridgerton series in full, along with a book by Talia Hibbert, if I'm pronouncing her name correctly. I hope so. But yes, that's basically the sum of this video, and I'll just be giving my little spiel. So, of course, first comes first, The Duke and I. This is the inspiration for the Bridgerton Netflix series. And the first season is about the story of Simon and Daphne. I didn't realize that Daphne was, in fact, not a diamond of the first water. She was more of a friend type person. So she was very approachable for suitors, but they only would see her as a friend. So in order to gain more potential suitors, Simon decides to offer for them to, make this deal of fake courting so that, the Tun mamas would leave him alone, and Daphne would gain more suitors just because they noticed that a duke was interested in her. But of course, they did grow to have mutual affection over time. Yeah, I don't want to share too much about this. I will say, though, for episode 6 in the show, that received a lot of criticism because it has to deal with sexual assault. I will say, while reading, I was very uncomfortable with how Daphne was interpreting everything, using it as an opportunity so she could have their children, even though Simon didn't want to have children. And he did lie to her, telling her that she didn't, or that he couldn't have children, when in fact he just didn't want to have children. So there's lack of communication, a lot of lack of communication in this one. But later on, after that night, I don't want to overshare, but after that night, it seemed as if Simon wasn't putting the blame fully on her, because he knew he still was coping-ish. Although he was intoxicated, he still knew what was happening and egged her on to continue the act. So yeah, I have mixed feelings about this, because he wasn't sober, but he was conscious and he did communicate. So I don't know. And then on Daphne's part, she did manipulate him. So I guess that shows where I stand. So I ended up giving this 4 stars. I knocked off a star because of that scene. And everything else I enjoyed about the book. Introductions to the other siblings, Simon coming with them on a trip, finally realizing that, hey, I need to let go of my father and my memories of him because it's holding me back. So yeah, and that was nice to see also in the epilogues, because his father, who wasn't a good parent at all, who was the late Duke before Simon, he left Simon some letters that he chose not to open, and we don't see them actually opened until the epilogues. And it turned out, hey, you were able to move forward and be willing to open this up, and really it was meaningless. But all in all, 4 stars for this for me. Next, I read, of course, the second book, The Viscount Who Loves Me, and this is the story about Anthony, Bridgerton, and Kate. Kate was, well, let's see, she has a half-sister, and her stepmother was good to her in this one. But Anthony was interested in Edwina, who is Kate's half sister, because she was the diamond of the first water during their season, and this was, I believe, the year after Daphne and Simon had gotten together. So Anthony is a rake. He courts Kate, Edwina first, and then eventually grows to appreciate Kate and look out for her, but they end up being caught in a compromising situation, which was kind of funny, but also kind of sad because it has to deal with Anthony's reaction to bees because their father had been stung and later died because of the reaction to bees. He was allergic. So he assumed Kate would have the same reaction in such a situation. He tried to help her. They were caught. And then they had to get married because of that. But, and it's just really sweet that Anthony didn't want to show too much affection for her because he always had this idea that he would die early because his father had. But in actuality, and Julia Quinn does say this, he does live to be in his 90s. So he overcame his fear and, growing older than his father and being able to see his children, have a lovely marriage. But it's just their banter. I really enjoyed it. And also their game of Pall Mall, which is some type of field game, from what I understood. I didn't bother looking it up, but based on the story, it sounds like some kind of sport field game. I don't want to say it's golf, but similar. So having to go through hoops instead of in a hole, if that makes sense. That's how I interpreted it anyway. But yeah, I ended up giving this 4 stars. Kate also did have a fear of storms. I thought that was interesting as well because it had to deal with the passing of her mother and her memories that she just couldn't recall fully, but later she does, and then they start to go away. So they learn to overcome their fears together. But yeah, 4 stars for this one. My least favorite of the Bridgerton series was An Offer from a Gentleman, and this is the story about Benedict Bridgerton and Sophie. Sophie was, in fact, the illegitimate daughter of an earl, and then when the earl finally married, the stepmom didn't like her at all. She brought in her own daughters. One of them despised Sophie. The other one was somewhat nice, but didn't have too much of a backbone. And then when the earl passes away, he did leave all his immediate relatives, or at least by marriage and by blood, things in his will. However, Sophia wasn't made aware of this, and she was treated like a servant very poorly. Benedict, when he first meets her, it's under his assumptions that she is just a servant and nothing more. But he is attracted to her. They do eventually have somewhat of a relationship, and she becomes the servant of the Bridgerton household. But Benedict does expect her to become his mistress, so that's mainly why I didn't like this. He kept pushing her to, be my mistress, I'll take care of you. What's the problem? This is all the best that I can give, and clearly not, because you're able to marry her towards the end. The ending was somewhat enjoyable. That's why I ended up giving it 3. In my scale, 1 star is very poor, 2 stars poor, 3 average, and then very good, excellent. That's just how I personally rate. So 3 stars for average, mainly because of Benedict's character. The villains were good villains. But Benedict as a hero, I could not back him up. Sophie is stronger, and she pulled through, but she still deserved better. Next, my favorite of the Bridgerton series. This is the second time I've read Romancing Mr. Bridgerton. Well, the first time it was on audiobook. However, I decided to obtain the hard copies for every single one and wanted to read it all in order. So I read this again. Colin is also my favorite sibling. Penelope is my favorite female character. And of course, she's Lady Whistledown, so that was revealed in the series. And I'm sorry if you didn't know, but now you know because it's everywhere. It's already been everywhere. This is also the last book in which Lady Whistledown is mentioned, but of course I did enjoy this. I gave it 5 stars. Not going to touch too much on it because, again, I reread it. Next, the story of Eloise and Philip. So Philip, he had been corresponding with Eloise for about a year after the passing of his wife, Marina Thompson, after she committed something, and I'm not going to explicitly say it. But yeah, this does deal with loss of a loved one and children. The children were very enjoyable. Their pranks, of course, were diabolical, but they did show growth, and it was nice to see Eloise be the maternal guidance that they needed. Philip had expected that when he was thinking about proposing to Eloise just to obtain a mother for the children, but he didn't realize he would be gaining a wife. They did end up being pushed into marriage sooner rather than later, though, because the Bridgerton brothers all stormed in to defend her honor and demand their wedding. Anthony did push that on both of them. Colin, always the, side funny brother. He could be serious too, but he's just my favorite, and I love the fact that he's mentioned in, I believe, every single one of the books, or at least featured in a scene in every single book. But yes, this one, enjoyable. Eloise and Philip, they also had very steamy scenes together that were a little more rough, but very playful, very enjoyable. Yeah, this is a good one. Also 5 stars. Then I did notice that I enjoyed the middle books the most. So this one was about Francesca and Michael. Francesca, in fact, married Michael's cousin, and after he passed away, Francesca, of course, was devastated. She did miscarry their child afterwards. Michael does move away temporarily and then moves back, and around that time, Francesca decides that she wants to remarry so that she can become a mother. But during that time, Michael, who had always loved Francesca since they'd met, but of course he couldn't act on it because she was already engaged to his cousin. But anyways, get to see their love blossom. He was fairly wicked. He was very, there's no better word to describe him but wicked. And I enjoyed those scenes with Francesca. So yeah, they were very deserving of that. The epilogues, I will say, at first I was concerned that she wouldn't be able to have children, but of course she does end up having children. She did keep it from the family though, so that was kind of bothersome. She's also the least mentioned Bridgerton series sibling in the series, I've noticed. So that's kind of unfortunate to me. I wish she was brought up more in the other books, aside from the fact that, her husband passed and she's in Scotland, and that's where they reside, which is the place where her former spouse and her future spouse resided. And she was kind of detached from her Bridgerton side of the family, although she loved them, but she never was compelled to stay, if that makes sense. So yeah, I did feel a little disconnect, but I still enjoyed it. 5 stars. The next one is about Hyacinth, and Hyacinth is the youngest of the Bridgerton siblings. However, her book is the seventh, and this is her story with Gareth. Gareth is, in fact, the grandson of Lady Danbury, who is one of my favorite characters throughout the series. If I were to rank, I would say Colin, then Penelope by default, then Eloise, then Lady Bridgerton, because her sass is just. And with the show, I know she is described differently in the series, but the show's version of Lady Danbury, I'm just like, she's the auntie everyone needs. And I know I've said it before, but she is the auntie everyone needs. But anyways, this one's about Hyacinth and Gareth. So he is the grandson of Lady Danbury, but his father figure in his life was not, in fact, his father. That was a way that they were estranged for a long period of time. And then when his brother passes away, although he was already an earl, Gareth becomes the next one because it's assumed that they were brothers. Well, they were still half brothers because they shared the same mother, but different fathers. So, yeah, this was more of a mystery type romance. He obtained a diary from his grandmother's side of the family, and through that he was able to learn who his father was. But at first it was in full Italian, so he needed to find an interpreter, and what do you know, Hyacinth is the one. Although her Italian isn't fluent, she was able to decipher enough to help figure out where a certain piece of treasure was, and in addition to figuring out who his father was, truly. So yeah, there was a bit of closure in here, somewhat misunderstanding. Well, Gareth did always intend to marry Hyacinth during their courting. However, he did end up seducing her to solidify their engagement because of his poor relationships with his father figure. So that was kind of, you could feel the heaviness, or at least I felt the heaviness within those scenes. I felt Hyacinth's pain. She's a very strong-willed character. I did also give this 5 stars. But yeah, this one was very good. Before I jump into the last book of the Bridgerton series, I did end up having to defer to another book, which was already on my TBR. But this one, take a hint, Dani Brown. This is the second one about the Brown sisters. The first one being Get a Life, Chloe Brown. Dani is the second eldest daughter, and this is her romance with Zafir. Zafir is a Pakistani background, and for one, I appreciated that diversity. Also, this touches a little bit on mental health and just, the toxic masculinity that surrounds sports. I was a sports person when I was younger, volleyball, basketball, swimming. Can't tell now, but I was. But anyways, this was a very enjoyable read. Dani Brown is a bisexual, but she didn't think she was going to be someone who would be into romance relationships. She was only DTF. And Zafir was her interest. She was security guard at where she worked. But after a video of them goes viral following a fire drill, they ended up deciding together that, or they would make an agreement to be a fake boyfriend and girlfriend, so Zafir could get his tackle it workshop more, I guess, more attention from the media, because he was a former rugby player. But then following the passing of his father and brother at the same time because of an accident, He had to cope with that, so he's trying to help other athletes cope with mental health. So that was a very good way to include um, a more well-rounded character. I also appreciated the fact that Zafir uh, always knew that he was attracted to Dani and wanted to get to know her more, but he held back because he knew Dani uh, didn't or claimed that she wasn't interested in anything romantic. But of course, she does end up feeling mutually, but she does have a little falling out. And then towards the end, she does do something for him that is just so romantic. Oh, and it also happens Saphir is a romance writer, or excuse me, romance reader. And I noticed that uh, there was, I want to say, a cameo of a Beverly Jenkins book in here, just claiming that Saphir had read Tempest. And that is a book by Beverly Jenkins, which is also published by Avion Books. Um, but yeah, it doesn't explicitly say Beverly Jenkins, but it did mention Tempest, and I'm just gonna assume that because it was historical romance. Also, yeah, just all in all, well-rounded story. I do have the next one, Act Your Age, Eve Brown. I'll be sharing as well the upcoming reads for next month. But yeah, this one also very, very good. Um, so yeah, and again, that one's a trilogy. I ended up giving it 4 stars. And then lastly, for this month, I read On the Way to the Wedding. This is the story about Gregory, who is the second youngest of the Bridgerton siblings, but he is the youngest brother. There's quite an age gap. So him and Colin are already 10 years apart. So his brothers are double digits older than him, and he always felt as if he had to prove himself. But he did always believe in love, and I really enjoyed that for his character. However, he does end up falling, or believes he falls in love with Hermione Watson. I will have to say that name alone made me think of Harry Potter because Emma Watson, the actress, and Hermione Granger was her character for Harry Potter. So I can't help but feel that was where the name came from. But her friend Lucy is, in fact, the one who helps encourage Gregory to pursue Hermione. But when Hermione ends up engaged in someone else who's very close relations to Lucy, then Gregory quickly moves on and realizes that he is interested in Lucy, but then Lucy is also engaged to someone else because of other family relations. I don't want to explain too much. I will say though, this did not have enough smut. I was hoping for more for the last book, or more of a presence for the other siblings, but it did not happen. I still gave it 5 stars though, because the second half, the plot, it just turned around for me. The villain is established, the problem is established. The wedding still follows through with the other betrothed, so they had to figure out how to get out of that. It was just so good, and I don't want to spoil it because I'm pretty sure everything I just said is also in the synopsis. But yeah, this was a nice conclusion. However, although I gave it 5 stars, I do wish the other siblings were presented more because it was the concluding book. Also, the second epilogue wasn't far enough into the future for me because there was an issue with their children, and Lucy was at risk. That's all I'm going to say. But she was at risk, and following that, I would have liked some time jump, so just to show that she was going to be okay in the long term, and that they would all be okay in the long term. But that didn't happen. But still, 5 stars. Excellent conclusion for the month of March. But yeah, thank you for watching. I'm sorry I kind of ranted again. Feel free to, speed up my videos because I know I do that all the time on videos. So yeah, thanks for watching. Stay tuned for my next month's reads for the month of April. I'm not sure if I'll be posting any until then, because I am in the last semester of school for myself and got a lot to do. So yeah, thanks for watching and take care. Bye.